Hi investigators, Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy with an important update from a question I've been asked recently. So what is it you're going to investigate when you go into the investigation industry? Well, that is a $64 question. You don't know what accident or incident is going to happen in the future, so it's hard to predict what you're going to investigate. No one can tell you with their crystal ball exactly what that is going to be. So when people come into this, they come into it thinking that, oh, yes, I'm going to investigate fraud, or I'm going to investigate cults, or I'm going to investigate sexploitation or inappropriate behaviour or bullying, whatever it might be. So today I'm going to run through some examples in relation to what you might investigate, whether it's corporate, government or private investigation. So one of the things that people say to me is, oh, look, on your YouTube channel, you've got this lady there in her bathers and that's sexist. It's in a ad for corruption for ICAC, for a surveillance investigator. Yeah, well, that's great. You know, you can think that and you can say that. But I also have another picture on the YouTube channel that I've got that looks like this. Nobody's written to me emails or anything else or comments and says that's sexist. This is actually what you're looking at is actually the best video of the 460 I've got on my YouTube channel. So let's have a look at it.
O Orlando tira a calça com a cueca dentro. Por que não tira a cueca dentro da calça?
Ele fica 5 dias com a mesma cueca. Sabe, a Maria tá ganhando 10 euros.
10 euros pra limpar?
Tá trabalhando depois do expediente.
Não.
É.
Ave Maria, que é isso? Esses demônios dessas crianças fizeram festa aqui de novo.
Se os pais soubessem tanto dinheiro e tão mau gosto pra música.
Você viu algo diferente na senhora Vandermeyer?
O que? Os peitos?
Silicone, com certeza.
Have to be the best ad on YouTube as far as investigations go. It's the beauty of that one. It's been sitting on my YouTube channel for 4 years, I think, and only 43 people have watched it. So never judge a book by its cover in relation to the value of it. Without a sense of humour, people, you will go insane very quickly as a licensed investigator, corporate investigator or government investigator. So let's jump straight into it and have a look at what government investigators might do. What are they going to investigate? It's one of my most frequently asked questions. What will you investigate as an investigator in Australia? Well, it won't be flower arrangements, kitties or puppies. It's going to be a whole lot worse than that. Being an investigator is going to involve investigating things where people have transgressed a compliance or a law or an issue. So you won't be doing simple, nice investigations as an investigator. Here's an example of a typical government investigator. This is a position vacant with the Australian Communication Media Authority. They investigate complaints regarding sex, gambling, drugs, language and more in free-to-air TV advertising. So when there's a complaint, these people have to go in and find out about it. In 2017, the most complained about TV commercial was an ultra-tune one where two ladies were driving along in their car, it caught fire, and they used fire extinguishers to put the fire out. There were 359 complaints about that advertisement in 2017. All of those complainants had to be interviewed and a report had to be made to advertising standards in relation to it. Ultimately, the complaints were dismissed. You're the investigator, you don't go into that, you just investigate it and report that the decisions are made by an advertising board separate from the investigation. The investigation may be shared with other government departments. All right, so that's a typical Australian Media Communications Authority investigation in relation to complaints about a sexist ad made by Ultratune in 2017. So they had over 317 complaints at the time about that. Now, Ultratune realised that they were getting a lot of attention really quickly, so they upped the ante. And this year in 2020, they exceeded themselves, and they've attracted so far, and we're only halfway through the year, 317 complaints. Let's have a look at how that worked. It's one of my most frequently. Here's a 2020 version of 309 complaints so far to June in 2020 about this Ultratune ad starring Pamela Anderson. The nature of those complaints: discrimination, vilification, exploitation, is degrading, violent, workplace health and safety, and they couldn't see what the advertisement was about. So the investigator had to go out and interview the complainants. Here are real examples. You can stop the video at this point and see 4 real examples of complaints about this commercial that went to free-to-air TV. Ultimately, the complaints were dismissed. So they were not upheld, and you can see the case. You can Google the case. Just stop the video right there and Google that case and find out all about it. As a code of conduct investigator, you are going to see graphic emails and texts and messages. They're going to have horrific images of children, animals, that sort of thing. You've got to be prepared for this as an investigator. You can't take the moral high ground. Every day you don't investigate a fatality of an infant, child or elder abuse, an accident made a person a vegetable in hospital, cruelty to the defenceless, or taken a statement from a grieving parent over their bullied adult child. Suicide is a good day. So be prepared to be involved in difficult investigations as an Australian corporate, government or private investigator. Now, it's a really, really important message. If you're going to get upset about cruelty to animals or about domestic violence because it reminds you of similar situations or whatever, you really must reconsider what you think you're going to be going into, because you are going to go and interview people who will use 2 boxes of tissues while they're recalling the event or what you're interviewing them about, because it was so horrific. If you could imagine a workers' compensation investigator who has to go and interview a police officer for her claim that's stress or psychological injury that's happened over a series of events over 10 years, and you get the explanation of each one of those events and what the police officer she attended and what she went through and what she saw. It's quite disturbing stuff that you'll be hearing. So you must be mentally prepared for this. You can't go into a career as an investigator with the moral high ground, with your opinions on this or that. You are going to be a person that reacts after the event. You don't prevent anything. You go and establish the facts after the event. And these are highly emotional situations. So my message today is think about what you are going to investigate. If you can't handle the things that you might have to investigate, and I've alluded to it earlier in our first ever live stream video, where loss adjusters that went to the floods in northern Queensland were interviewing people who'd lost children. They were fatalities in the floods. They couldn't handle the interviews, and the loss adjusters ran out of the room in tears. Now, that left the claimant there losing twice, once during the interview and previously having lost a relative or a child in those floods. So you must be able to follow through with what you're going to do. You're going to be putting together the last 3 weeks of someone's life in some stages. I've done that, and my manager's come up to me and said, well, what did you think about that? And this would be the hardest, meanest, most been around manager I've ever had. And I said to her, I felt sorry for him. And she looked at me and she said, so did I. So you've got to be prepared for this sort of thing. You put your hand up to be a licensed private investigator. It's not going to be all kittens, skittles, beer and puppies. It's going to be serious stuff that's required to you to suck it up and follow right through on that investigation. And if you do, someone will get a benefit or a compensation or a payout that they deserve. And that's your job. Your job's not there to deny people things. So think about that. Think about that before you enter into this as a career. If you can't handle that, you've been warned today, and you can't say no one ever told you. It's great fun being an investigator. You will really enjoy it. No 2 days are the same. And as you saw at the start of this video, MJM in New South Wales, they are seeking workers' compensation investigators and CTP liability, that's compulsory third-party liability investigators, to conduct factual investigations in New South Wales. Now, if you're a licensed private investigator, get in touch with MJM. Their details are scrolling at the bottom of the screen. They want to speak to you. They want to pay you to do work. They have an internal training program that will bring you up to speed on workers' compensation and CTP liability very quickly. So if you're experienced or if you're emerging, get in touch with MJM. We'll have more news on this on Friday in our weekly Friday wrap-up of what's happened in the investigation industry this week in Australia. But until then, I'm Mike Evans from the Australian Security Academy.